Welcome back to Serving Challenge. You've heard the phrase, you know the phrase, you've probably said the phrase, actions speak louder than words. Words are important. You can create worlds with words, absolutely, but there comes a time when if someone really wants to know who you are, who I am, what they should look at is not what we say, or not even what we say we believe, but what do our actions prove? There comes a time to put your beliefs to the test, and simply put, the test is this. Will you act as if what you believe is really true or not? James, the brother of Jesus, is reminding us of this truth when he says these words. Faith by itself, if it's not accompanied by action, is dead. Now listen closely here. James isn't questioning someone's faith or eternity. It's not a matter of you have to do these things to be saved. You need to have more good works than bad works to be saved. No, that's not the gospel. He's simply making a point that the gift of grace that God gives to all of us who believe ought to elicit an outside response. It's a gift that compels those who have received it to action. If it doesn't compel you to action, then somewhere along the way, you've missed out on what the gift was intended to do. And by the way, that is sin, missing the mark. And anytime we do that, it gives you and I a chance to come back to God, to be forgiven and restored, and to do better the next time. Not because we have to, but because God is real and we want to. I like the way Dallas Willard says it. Grace is not opposed to effort. It's opposed to earning. Earning is an attitude. Effort is an action. So while your actions will never earn you salvation, they can help others come to a real faith in Jesus. Jesus even said, in the same way, let your light shine before others that they might see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. And so what would it look like to take what God has done for you and to now shine that light to help others in this world so that they too can find God? So today I'm on the Better Together campus for a nonprofit in Omaha, Nebraska called Abide. Abide's an amazing organization that came together in 1989 with a mission to revitalize the inner city, one neighborhood at a time until there is no more inner city. The term inner city was first used in the early 1960s to describe areas that were redlined due to the federal housing policy shifts a decade earlier. You see, during the 1949 Housing Act, real estate agents divided their cities into desirable and undesirable neighborhoods by drawing red lines on a map. And as a result of this, many cities sadly became even more segregated, which negatively affected the habits and mindset of an entire generation. And over time, at least in Omaha, these red lines we found turned into red dots on a map. And red dots are placed to identify where homicides had taken place. And in the formerly red line areas, which was only 735 blocks wide in Omaha, it actually accounted for 40% of the homicides that had taken place. And so how do you change something like that? The answer is not to believe that it will get better, but to do something about it and to take a step. And as we've already mentioned in this challenge, what you believe about Jesus will never change the world, but how you follow Jesus could change the world. And Abide's story started with one family that moved all the way in from the suburbs intentionally to live in North Omaha where we are. They took a step. They acted on this opportunity. They saw a need and did something to help. They risked their own comforts and took a chance and went to North Omaha to revitalize it, to build community, to lead neighbors to their God-given potential, and to serve that very neighborhood. And their witness inspired others to do the same. And so another family did this, and another family, and another family. And to date, through decades of serving, through many partnerships and donations, Abide developed into a nonprofit ministry and formed one of their programs known as the Lighthouse Program. And there are now 75 families who have committed to serving Jesus by living in North Omaha and serving their neighbors. They've taken serious the words of Jesus we introduced earlier, to let your light shine before others that they would see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. You see, shining the light of Jesus requires action. But we're finding out as the light of Jesus shines in these once places that were known for darkness, the light is winning. You ever heard of the term slacktivism? It's a relatively new term that combines two words, slacker and activism. And it's the practice of supporting a political or social cause that involves very little effort or commitment. And it's most seen in social media today. Studies have actually shown that those who are most vocal on social media by liking, clicking, or sharing something actually end up being the least likely to donate time or money to the very causes they're supposedly supporting. The real danger that we can experience in our world, especially in our social media crazed world, is we sometimes can attribute feeling compassion with actually being compassionate. So as we look back at Jesus, the most common emotion attributed to him is his compassion. His compassion is what drew others to him. But amazingly, when you look back at all the times he's compassionate, you're going to find something show up again and again and again. Kyle Idleman says the conjunction "and" almost always follows his feelings of compassion. And so in your Companion Serving Challenge book on day 22, I've got many Bible verses that show this to be true, and the story is almost always the same. It will say Jesus had compassion and ... So he had compassion, and what did he do? He healed the sick. He forgave people of their debt. He began to teach. He raised people from the dead. Like over and over and over again, Jesus didn't just feel it on the inside. He acted on the outside. And just as he did this in his ministry for those that were in front of him in the Gospels, he's also done the same for you and me. He's had compassion on us. And I love the words from Philippians 2:7-8 that tells us Jesus made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. And being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself. We live in a world where it's easy to experience compassion fatigue, and the technological advances of the past 2 decades allow us to see and experience way more injustice and suffering than we ever did in the past. And if we're honest, it's tiring, and I get it. Even in the example of Abide that I'm sharing in this video, this is just one example of darkness in the world. There are so many others, and I can feel exhausted by all the suffering and injustice. I can feel overwhelmed and think, can I even really make a difference anyway? But think about this. God has always, from the beginning, now, and even into the future, seen and known every injustice. He's got a front row seat to every kind of suffering. And if we're real, even with all the technological advances and news at our fingertips, we still hardly have a percentage of the injustice and suffering going on that actually hits our lives in a real way. But God does. He literally knows all, sees all, is over all. And so if anyone ought to suffer with compassion fatigue, it ought to be God. And yet, even with seeing all of this suffering and seeing all of this injustice, even in looking over your and my situation and our brokenness, he had compassion and didn't settle for fatigue. He didn't avoid it, ignore it, get angry about it. No, he acted on it. He had compassion, and as Philippians said, he came to live as a human being. He had compassion, and he humbled himself to be a servant. He had compassion, and he was even willing to lose his life so that you and I in the end might win eternal life. Returning to Kyle Idleman's words, the test of compassion is in the "and." Biblical compassion, then, is a feeling followed by an action. Even the Oxford Dictionary claims the opposite of compassion is indifference. So just as James said that faith without works is dead, Jesus shows us that compassion without action is dead. So we are standing right now in a lighthouse, at least a future lighthouse for Abide. It is currently under construction. I'm really excited about what is happening here at this lighthouse because there's people that are performing and acting upon their faith. Multiple studies have shown that the biggest regrets people live with are not actions that they've done, but rather things they haven't done. Inaction turns out to be a very costly action. Winston Churchill, who led Britain to victory in World War II, once said, "I never worry about action, but only inaction." And personally, I wonder how many plans, ideas, and dreams never come to fruition because we simply didn't act on them. So can I be blunt with this question? If you say you believe in Jesus, then what's stopping you from acting on your faith? Because if you believe in Jesus, then all 4 of these things are true. Number 1, your actions do change lives. There are people that are really hurting and suffering right now. And you get to not only help that person in a time of need, but also at the same time, if you believe in the words we've been saying of Jesus, that you can be the light that introduces them to the God of the universe. So while your actions will never save you, they can help save somebody else. Soon after the first lighthouse came into effect with Abide, police officers began taking note of some changes in the neighborhoods. And they encouraged and came alongside Abide to serve with them and delivered the incredible news that when Abide became a part of a neighborhood, the amount of crime would decrease by 75%. There was and there is a genuine difference in neighborhoods that lighthouses from Abide are present in. Why? Because actions really do change lives and make a difference. Number two, you don't go alone. You see, God promises the gift of the Holy Spirit to those that believe. And so that means that everywhere you walk, get this, you have the same power that rose Jesus from the dead that now lives in you. Resurrection power lives in your veins too. How cool is that? Number three, you and I, we know how the story ends. See, when you serve and take steps of action for Jesus, I'll admit it can be scary, it can feel big, but you and I know how this thing ends. We can flip to the end and see that in the end, everything is made right, and so we don't need to worry. God's going to accomplish what He is going to accomplish. And so we can go without fear. I love the words of David in Psalm 18, verse 29. He says, with your help, God, I can run through a barricade. With my God, I can scale a wall. Why? Because He knows it's all going to work out. Speaking of which, number four, God can even fix things when you break them. And this is the best part, that when I step, when you take action, or when I misstep, or we do something wrong, God's a master at making everything work for His good. And sometimes when we mess up, don't you know that allows God to show off even more? I love the red letters that just jump off the page to me from 2 Corinthians 12, verse 9. Where Jesus says, my grace is sufficient for you and my power is made perfect in weakness. So even if I make a mistake, I've got His grace that He's won for me, and His power is going to be displayed all the more. So let's live a life with no regrets. Serve like Jesus. Let's have compassion and act. And let's see what God does through your actions.